Hey there, you look like you want to have your TBR busted. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back today to do a little damage to your TBR. Maybe, I don't know. Some of you guys probably don't need any more help, but I'll see what I can do for you here. With this, guys, is I know that a lot of people were saying, Mike, but you just did like your favorite trilogies, so why are you really making a list like this? Well, with this, guys, I'm going to try to avoid some of the overlap. Obviously, there's going to be some that might roll over on both of those videos, but it isn't just going to be me repeating everything that I said in my top 10 fantasy series of all time, or my favorite trilogies ever, but there will be some overlap maybe on some of that. What this is, guys, is something that I've heard so much of since I started this channel was, well, that series sounds really great, but I've been reading A Song of Ice and Fire, or I've been reading King Killer Chronicle, and I'm not starting any more series until they are done. I've done it. I've been guilty of it, but sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the case, but for those who do want to be that way, today, guys, I want to talk about 15 series that are complete that I think you should maybe give a try, and I would recommend breaking your TBR for if you're looking for something fresh to kind of get you out of your comfort zone maybe, or just maybe, hey, you're looking for something new. I think that these will be some that will all apply under that umbrella here, guys. Now, these aren't going to be ranked or anything like that. I'm just going off of publication order, but these are all series that are complete, so you will get a complete story in many cases, and I'll explain why here with the very first one, guys, because we got to go all the way back to 1932. This is the Chronicles of Conan by Robert E. Howard, written between 1932 and 1936. This isn't much of a series per se. What it is with Robert E. Howard is you could read any single one of his little short stories here in any order you want. In one of them, Conan could be a king. In one of them, he could be a slave. And the next one, he could be a warrior. It doesn't really matter with Conan. It's all over the place. There is an official reading order if you want to look it up. And that's something that fans have done. But Robert E. Howard never placed an actual reading order on this, nor did he write it as a series. Now, look, guys, with most of these stories, I think it's low commitment because they're all like 15, 20 pages long at the longest. I mean, there's a couple that are a little longer, but he's like Lovecraft in that regard where all of them are very, very quick reads. You can read them all very quick because they really are between like 15 and 20 pages. But the thing with Robert E. Howard is he was able to put so much stuff into a short story like that you feel completely satisfied. He was just absolutely amazing at that, and just gone too soon, obviously. But I gotta say, turn the clock back sometimes, find out where some of these pillars are, and this is the father of sword and sorcery here, guys. I think you'll find plenty to like if you give Robert E. Howard a shot. Let's move up a little bit here to 1950. Now, this was completed in 1956, and a lot of people don't know it came before Lord of the Rings. They always kind of talk about C.S. Lewis when they talk about Tolkien, but I'm talking about the Chronicles of Narnia, obviously. This is something I think is going to be for younger readers, obviously. I read it when I was very young, so I have a ton of nostalgia for it, but going back and rereading it as an adult, I've been like, it still has all that same charm and wonder, and I think it's a great story. I feel like a lot of people have kind of been turned off because they hear about like Christian themes and things like that. Those things are there, I think, if you're looking for them, but if you just want a fantasy story, I think that you'll have a great time. I just have so many fond memories of this series. This was my first series, I think you would say, my first fantasy series that I ever read as a young man. Everything was just, short stories or standalones or things like that. This was the first series that I really got into when I was younger, and it's absolutely different. I admit that there's some nostalgia there, but I think it's obviously one of those things I think if you want to share with your kids, I think there would be plenty of value there. And I think it's a wonderful, complete story. There are a couple of them that maybe didn't really like. Silver Chair's kind of to me. Horse and His Boy, maybe not. But I think overall, the story of the Pevensies is really great, and you will find plenty to like there. I just mentioned it. I've got to talk about it, guys. 1954, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. A list like this, without me saying the Lord of the Rings, would be like peanut butter without jelly. I mean, what's the point? I love the Lord of the Rings, and I will never, ever shy away from that. I get so many comments on my videos when I talk about how much I love the Lord of the Rings, and they talk about us old folks like me that feel like we have to mention it. No, we don't have to do anything. We just truly love this story, and I think it is quite possibly the greatest story ever told. And you know what, guys? It's complete. You can do that complete journey. In fact, a lot of people get mad when I say it's 3 books. So, Tolkien did write it as one story. The publisher divided it into 3. It's become known as 3 at this point, but it is one story. So if you want to read it as one volume, I say go for it. But if you haven't read Lord of the Rings at this point, please do. Please do. It deserves a place on any list like this, and it is loved because it's amazing, guys. It really, really is. Even today, no matter how many times I've read it like 7 times now, and it never, ever gets old. It's the greatest journey ever in the fantasy genre. So I think that anytime you guys are looking for a tale of friendship and a tale of just going to hell and back with some of your bros, I think this is the story that you should pick up. Okay, how about moving up here? 1982 is when it started, and it went along that path of the beam until 2004, guys. I'm talking about Stephen King's The Dark Tower. Now, with me in this, is I think that it's become incredibly misconstrued over the years. Oh, Mike hates the end of Dark Tower, but somehow it's like his top 5 fantasy series of all time. This series is amazing, and I did not hate the ending of The Dark Tower. There are decisions that Stephen King made in books 6 and 7 that I was not on board with, and it really, really demotivated me, will not lie, but the parts are still so great that I would say this series is one of my favorite fantasy series. And I don't even really necessarily call it a fantasy series. It's just so many mashup of so many different genres, but it does kind of fall under the fantasy umbrella. But The Dark Tower, guys, is that series for you if you're looking for something that's completely original. You're not going to find anything else like it. It has a really, really great main cast that you're going to fall in love with, and you're just interested in one hell of a journey. And again, like I said, it's so original because he takes so many genres and just mashes them up together and sees what comes out on the other end. And I absolutely love that concept. It is something that will always be dear to me, and I'll always remember that journey. And I was a waiter for this. And the thing was, what I mean by a waiter, guys, is I didn't get to binge this. I was waiting for years between these books, and I think that's why I had a different reaction to some of these things, because I'll see so many people today that binge books 1 through 7. They don't have near the problems that I have. So it's kind of like that thing with the Slog and Wheel of Time. When you weren't waiting, I don't feel like those problems are going to arise for everybody else, because you don't have that many times, that waiting time between books to say have expectations for things. You can just kind of go along for the ride, and I implore you to go along for that ride and pick up The Dark Tower. Yes, if you want to start with Stephen King at The Dark Tower, you can. That's a question I get a lot, but you absolutely can. You might miss some references, but maybe, hopefully, it makes you become such a big Stephen King fan, you look for some of those references in his greater multiverse. 1990, guys, I think it would be impossible to not talk about that wheel. I'm talking about the Wheel of Time, completed in 2013. 2 authors, obviously, 14 books. Robert Jordan's epic here, guys. I think besides Lord of the Rings, this is probably the most popular fantasy series of all time, and it is that way for a reason. And I know that people absolutely love this series, me, or they can't stand it. They don't understand why it's so popular. I hope that you'll give it a try and kind of decide for yourself. Sure, it has things that I've talked about. I did a good and the bad of Wheel of Time video a long time ago, and I talked about the things that didn't work for me. But the thing is the things that did work for me, absolute perfection. They're really, really great. So I think it's a wonderful story. If you are a character first reader, you're going to love it because it has some of the greatest characters ever written in fantasy, and there's so many things that are still, hat tips to this series to this day in the modern fantasy community. So I think you owe it to yourself if you've got the longevity in you, if you have the endurance to get through a series this long. But I always say, guys, where's the fire? Take your time with it. No one's saying you have to read 14 of these suckers in a row, but I think it's a journey that will make your life feel more rich for doing so, and you will treat those characters like family by the time you reach the end, and you'll be a big old sack of tears like I was on camera back when I first started this channel. This one's kind of recent for me, guys. 1995, and it finished in 2017 with an asterisk by it. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm talking about The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. I'm currently on book number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think I'm about to start book number 10, which is the 4th book of the Rainwild Chronicles. What makes the Realm of the Elderlings so digestible, I think, is that she breaks them up into sub-series. You have a trilogy, a quadrilogy, and then another trilogy to wrap the series up. So you got 3 trilogy, quadrilogy, trilogy. There you go. Say that one time fast. I think that it makes it really, really easy to take breaks. If you just want to read a trilogy at a time and then stop, you can do that. You want to read the whole thing? Sure, you can do that. It's not a perfect series. It's not a series I think it's going to be for everybody. I think if you are, for example, you're one of those people who loves The Name of the Wind, I think you will adore The Realm of the Elderlings. Very much slow burn fantasy, beautiful writing style, well-developed characters. Her characters are top notch, man. I think she's only behind Stephen King when it comes to developing her characters and making them feel like people that you know because you know them inside out. This is not your typical fantasy series. There's not a ton of action. It's very slow burn. It is very much a character study of several characters, and I think that it's going to be one of those things where if it hits for you, man, it is a grand slam. But other people are going to read it and they're going to be like, I don't understand the hype with this series. So it's not a fantasy series I think I could recommend to everybody, but if you're into beautiful writing and very well developed characters over getting the punching and the pew 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 and the sword fights, I think you're going to find plenty to enjoy with The Realm of the Elderlings. I shall be finishing this up here in a few months. Only got 4 books left. Starting to get that point where I'm starting to be like, oh, well, I didn't think I'd ever finish this. Now I'm getting kind of sad because it is about to end. I think one of the books that was the most sad for me when I saw it end, guys, was in 2007 when The Deathly Hallows came out. I'm talking about Harry Potter, 97 through 2007. And I still love that to this day, I will get people being like, oh, well, yeah, well, I'm 38 years old, or I'm 42 years old. I'm too old for Harry Potter. No, you're not, man. That's what's amazing about this story, is they are labeled as books for young readers. But it doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what gender you are. You're going to like this story, I think. And it's just one of those things. I don't know what it is about it, but there is truly some magic involved. Because, for example, Spencer, my friend over there at the Fantasy Files podcast, he was one of those that was like, Harry Potter. No, I didn't read it when I was younger. I'm not really going to enjoy it. He just recently read it, and I think he read the whole thing in like a week, and he's absolutely obsessed with it now. I have a really good friend that I watch football with. He doesn't even like the fantasy genre, and he's like, all right, Mike, you talk about the books on YouTube. Give me some books to try. And I was like, I think you'd probably like Harry. He's like, I ain't reading no Harry Potter, man. I ain't got no kids. And I'm like, just try it. Guy is outright obsessed with it now. He went to like a Harry Potter themed restaurant in downtown Houston because of this. So it doesn't matter what you're into. You're going to find something to like about Harry Potter. If you've made it this far without reading Harry Potter, at this point, I feel like you've just got to be curious. For the pop culture sake alone, I think you owe it to yourself to give it a try. But man, give it like a couple of books because you can read them really quick. It's not really a big commitment. I think that I think that The Last Battle in Wheel of Time is longer than the first Harry Potter book, okay? So I feel like as fantasy fans, you should be able to get through these books really, really quick. They are just page turners, man. You can't stop with those books. I was rereading it with my kids, and I was just having a blast, again, reading it again at this age. So I love it, guys, and I know that a lot of people will have this big, big apprehension, like, oh, I'm too old for it now. I missed the bus when it happened. No, guys, I think you will enjoy it if you just give it a try. How about some pew pew pew, some spaceships, and some lasers? I think everyone knows at this point that I am a big Star Wars fan, and I absolutely adore the new Jedi Order. Now, what was so amazing about the new Jedi Order, guys, when it was happening, this happened between 99 and 2003, and these are 19 books here, is I said what this was to me was the blueprint for what became the MCU. Is you had a group of writers get together with one vision in mind. I want you all to come up with these stories. Here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end. Here's where we're going. But what we want to do is we want Star Wars to grow up. We want to move away from the Empire. We want new villains. And I'm not saying that the Empire characters can't come back. We want to grow up a little bit. Our heroes can be in danger. And they set the bar with that first book with killing off one of the major legacy characters in that series. So it showed you right away this series is growing up. Now look, I have a lot of friends that were Star Wars fans that said they couldn't because they couldn't watch their heroes die, because it was pretty dark. It was pretty gruesome at some parts. There were some parts of the series that were so dark, it like actually depressed me. But guys, every 3 months a new book was coming out. It really made me think when the MCU was at the peak of its powers, with that build up to Endgame, that's what it felt like when I was doing the new Jedi Order. So I just loved it. Like I said, I felt like I had grown up and I wanted Star Wars to grow up with me, and it did. And like I said, it might be too dark for some people, but I loved it. I thought it was very adult. And again, it just felt like the last hurrah. You know, the unifying force was a book that just had me in tears, because it felt like that moment, you know, when you're moving on to the next phase of your life and you look around the room and you say, this is probably the last time that we're all going to be together again. That's how it felt with those original trilogy Star Wars characters with the new Jedi Order. And I absolutely love the series. Are they all great? No, of course not. You got 19 books. You got a dozen different authors. Of course, not everything's going to feel the same. But there are moments in there that are so incredible that I still consider them canon in the Star Wars universe. So I love it, and I hope more people will give it a try. I don't think you can start there. I've had lots of people talk about, could I start there? I made a video about where to start with the EU. It really depends on you. You would be quite confused, I think, if you started there and all you've seen is the original movies, and there's several great series you're going to be skipping, to get there. But I do think it's a series that you should definitely put on your radar if you are interested. If you're like me and you're so jaded with what Disney's done to Star Wars, and you want to go back to what made you love Star Wars in the first place, the new Jedi Order, guys, that will get you back to loving that galaxy far, far away. You want to talk about something far, far away, something that I started in 2021, I'm still working on, but I think it deserves a mention here. Now, I don't know if I want to tell you to break your TBR to do this, but I think if you feel like you have reached the PhD level in your fantasy reading, Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson is going to be the series for you. 1999 to 2011, these are 10 massive, massive books that just sprawl all over this world. And now look, Malazan is the one on this list that is without a doubt not for everybody. It is a series that is very challenging. It is very challenging. It sometimes can feel like work, but it is absolutely ambitious. There's nothing else like it. And Steven Erikson just goes for it. It is easily up there with The Dark Tower as the most ambitious and unique thing I think I've ever read in a fantasy universe. I love a lot of Malazan. There's some things that haven't worked for me, and there was parts that burned me out because I was trying to read these giant, massive books way faster than I think you should. I say with Malazan, man, take your time and understand, man, it's hard. It's hard for a reader like me when people are like, oh, just don't worry about it if you don't understand it. That's hard. It's hard to accept. But I feel like Steven Erikson is going to get you there if you're just patient. It's a lot of pages. And yeah, Malazan fans will be like, oh, just wait till you get to book 6. It's amazing. You're going to be like, book 6? It all matters. Trust me. I'm in book 8 right now. I'm currently working in it. Did take a long break because I burned myself out reading books 6 and 7 like back to back. And it's going to happen if you try to rush it. So I say take your breaks with something like Malazan. But again, if you feel like you have run out of challenges in the fantasy universe and you want something that does not hold your hand and you want something that's just going to take you for a wild ride, you'd be hard-pressed to find one as up there in that category, in that echelon, as Malazan, Book of the Fallen. So I think it's an incredible, incredible series. You made me guess right now. I say I'd probably finish it end of next year, and people are like, whoa, you only got 3 books left? It's going to take you that long? I want to take my time with this because I don't want to risk burning myself out again, especially since a lot of people say book 9 is the most challenging one there is. So I'm real close. I'm real close to that. But I am excited to finally finish the series. And again, like I said, you're at the PhD level of your fantasy reading. You feel like everything else is just kind of just boring to you or repetitive. Well, Malazan's going to be the most original thing you have ever read. So I definitely recommend it. But I say give yourself about 2 books at least to see if it's for you, because that first book is seriously confusing. I mean, I think all the books are seriously confusing, but book 1 especially turns a lot of people off because they feel like they don't know what's going on. And then book 2, it's like, oh, it's a whole new cast. I'm confused. Just trust the process is all I will say with Malazan. How about something that's a little lighter than Malazan? This one I think is great if you have kids, or say you're just getting into the fantasy genre and you happen to play the God of War games and you really liked Greek mythology. I think Percy Jackson and the Olympians is something that's really, really approachable. And I read this with my kid last year, this series. This came out 2005 through 2009, and Rick Riordan still got that universe going. But I'm just talking about the first 5 books, Percy Jackson, the Olympians. It is a tight story. It actually is a lot of fun. It is middle grade books, guys. You're gonna get something ridiculous, like there's one part where like these guys are shooting bow and arrows with boxing gloves on them. It gets silly sometimes, but it really does have a lot of heart. And I thought reading this with my kid, I was gonna be facepalming the whole time. I had a lot of fun with it. Is this something that I'd probably read at this age alone? No, it's not like Harry Potter. I don't think it's gonna be like that. It is aimed at middle grade audiences only, really. But if you can share that with your young kids, or if you are a young kid, I think you will enjoy the books quite a bit. So I think they're great family books. If you're going to read together, it'd be a lot of fun. Or you know what? Sometimes you just want to say, hey, I want to go back and feel like a kid again. I think that Percy Jackson is just great. It is a phenomenal, phenomenal little series. And I had a ton of fun. I never regret reading this one. And I love that I've got to share that with my kid. It was a lot of fun. And I recommend it. How about the Mistborn trilogy, guys? 2006 to 2008. Also known as Era 1. I know a lot of people think with this, is it nostalgia? I'm not sure. It is the first time I read Brandon Sanderson. It was when I was first really getting back into reading fantasy a lot. Because there was a time where all I was doing was I was just rereading the Song of Ice and Fire books over and over again. And then I found First Law, and someone said, hey, maybe try something a little lighter, maybe not quite as brutal. And how about the Mistborn books by Brandon Sanderson? I'm like, is that the guy that finished Wheel of Time? That other series I hadn't read yet? So that was when I had first learned about Brandon Sanderson. And what I love about these books is just it's got such a likable crew. It was the first one, I think, outside of Song of Ice and Fire I read that had a really big cast and you really liked every character. Now, I know a lot of people are kind of turned off by books 2 and 3. Not me. I read it in a 1-volume series. So I have a hard time distinguishing between books 1, 2, and 3 in my memory. I haven't reread it or anything like that, but I remember that I really did enjoy it. I had a great time with it. Again, it's I would say it's probably, I don't really want to call it YA because you do have a lot of violence in there for me to call it YA, but I do think it's one of those kind of series, if you're transitioning from like a Harry Potter to an epic fantasy, it's a great, great place to start. That's why I always recommend that people start there with Brandon Sanderson, because I do feel like he levels up a bit after that when we get to like Stormlight Archive and stuff. But Era 1, I'll always be endeared to those characters. I had an amazing time with them, and I think it showed me in that first book that Brandon Sanderson was going to be an author that was able to subvert expectations, because you go into that first book about midway point, you're like, okay, I think I know where this series is going, and it completely turns it on its head. So he's really, really great. He did this in Warbreaker too, of subverting your expectations but never insulting you. I think he's really, really good at that, and it started with Mistborn. I think it's an amazing series, so it's not just nostalgia, I don't think, but I don't know, I haven't revisited it. How about that First Law trilogy, guys? 2006 till 2008. This was a series that was introduced to me because I was so frustrated with waiting so long for new Song of Ice and Fire books. And a good friend of mine said, hey, well, why don't you check these out? And the first thing I said to him, was it finished? And he's like, the 3rd book just came out. Perfect. Now, I read all 3 of these books in like a weekend. I just ate them up. I have read the series, this original trilogy 3 times. I think it's one of those I would put on this list because, yes, there are other books in the universe, but if you want to just read these 3, you can't feel like you have a complete story. So I'm going to go ahead and count it. If you do love it, there are 6 more books in that universe, including a sequel trilogy, if you want to. But again, I don't feel like you have to if you want to stop there. I recommend that you do, but for the sake of this list, the First Law, if you're wanting something, I don't want to say like a Song of Ice and Fire. I say take something like a Song of Ice and Fire, take away the dragons and take away the prophecy stuff. And I think there you go. You've got what's going on in First Law. I think with when you talk about Grimdark, people are always like, what is Grimdark? Just look at, there's no real clear-cut good guys and bad guys. Or the characters that would sometimes be bad guys in the books that you usually read, you find yourself kind of rooting for those characters. So I think you're going to have rooting interests, no doubt. You're going to have the characters you love and the characters you love to hate. But I think about my favorite character from the series, I'm like, that would be the villain in most other things that I had read up to that point. So he's really amazing at that. And again, just probably the most memorable characters in fantasy that I've ever read. His dialogue is so good. Like, you can read a dialogue just one line of dialogue and you know which character that is because his characters are so distinguished well. So I absolutely adore this series. It never ever gets old. I have sold it to a billion people. This was my Red Rising before Red Rising, in that this was the series that I was knocking on people's doors and saying, have you heard about our Lord and Savior Joe Abercrombie, trying to get more people to read it. Enough people now, I feel like I've gotten on the First Law. Now I've moved to Red Rising, which I feel like is kind of taken off as well. So I've got to find a new series to go with. But yeah, amazing series, guys. And I can't say enough about it. I hope by now you know how much I love this series and you have read it. Next up, guys, Riyria Revelations, 2008 to 2012. This is 6 books. It's sold in like a set of 3 that they have like 2 stories in each one. They're really short. I don't feel like that's why they probably put them 2 in one book. It feels like a regular fantasy novel when you do it that way, but it is 6 individual stories of Royce and Hadrian with one overarching theme for the whole story and one just a lot of plot points that kind of carry on to each book. But it is 6 adventures of Royce and Hadrian, without a doubt probably my favorite duo in fantasy. I love these two very, very likable rogue characters that you just can't get enough of, and you just want to go on an adventure with them. And I love that Michael J. Solomon is one of those writers who writes his complete story before he releases it. That way he knows what works and what doesn't, and boom, you don't have to wait for his book. So that's why he's one of my automatic authors, and I think that Riyria is a series I'm going to recommend for all ages. Yes, it is probably, if you're really into heavy adult epic fantasy, it might seem a little light to you, but you know, if you love to just have that throwback to traditional fun fantasy, I think you're going to have a great time, Riyria. And I feel like the world building is very underrated. It really is. I got to have some sci-fi on here. I know I should have more, but I haven't read a ton of sci-fi series, if I'm being honest with you guys. The only one that I've read, and I'm almost done with, I'm finishing up book number 7 right now. I'm talking about The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. That is Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. Their powers combined make James S.A. Corey. Now, I learned about this series from watching the television show when it first came out, and I was like, oh, these are books. Oh, okay, great. At the time, I love sci-fi TV, and I'll give anything new a try, and I was just loving that series. So I started reading the books, and I said, well, I feel like I'm spoiling the show now, so I'll wait till the show's over. The show is done now, but 2011 through 2021, the series is done. It has many accolades for how the series is wrapped up, and I'm excited to get there. So I absolutely think that it's been one of the most consistent series that I've ever read. Is every book like the best book ever? Absolutely not, but I've never felt like any one of the 7 books I've read so far have been bad or filler or anything like that. They've all been incredibly consistent, and I really enjoyed this trip, and I just love that Rocinante crew. I feel like it's really approachable sci-fi, guys, where you don't have a lot of the technobabble and things like that. It's pretty straightforward. It does get a little heavy into the politics of these worlds, and it's easy to follow. You never are going to feel like you're just confused. You don't know what's going on. But the technology is really believable because it's a near future, and I think that really helps really build out this world. And again, you're just going to love that crew. I have had a great time with it. I'm sad again that I'm coming towards the close. And speaking of the close, guys, I got one more on here. Really early in the days of this channel, I was talking about The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. I'm still going to. I think The Faithful and the Fallen is just such a great tribute to classic fantasy. The quest to find all these magic artifacts and things like that. If you like Bernard Cornwell, I think you'll like John Gwynne. Quite as technical maybe as Bernard Cornwell gets, but I feel like when I read Warlord Chronicles, which that would be another one that you could throw on here, Warlord Chronicles, I felt like, oh, okay, so John Gwynne very much like that series as well, because there are some similar things there. But I love it. I love the questing. I love the bands. I love the war parties, all that stuff. You have some incredible journey character arcs in these stories. Like there's a character in the first book that you think is going to die early on and doesn't, and becomes my favorite character by the end of that series. So just an incredible journey with likable characters, and it is very much good guy versus bad guy kind of thing. But I always say it's like it's not like A Song of Ice and Fire, but I think A Song of Ice and Fire fans will enjoy it, even if it isn't quite as brutal as Song of Ice and Fire is. But I think you'll like it. It's got a lot of similarities, I think. And animal companions. So guys, that is my list. Went a little longer here than usual. When you talk about 15 of these series that I love, it's hard for me not to. But guys, I hope you will give any of these a chance, because your TBR doesn't need a breather. It might need a thorough breakthrough. So drop in the comments, let me know what you think, guys, and I will talk to you there.